I married her out of pity. It wasn't love. It was simply the right thing to do. Eleanor Ashford wasn't supposed to hear those words. They drifted through a half-open library door only hours after her wedding ceremony. Softly spoken, almost casually spoken, the kind of words a man never expects his wife to overhear. Eleanor stopped walking. The silver tray in her hand suddenly felt heavier. Inside the library, two men continued their conversation, unaware they had an audience. "You didn't have to marry her," one voice said. Eleanor recognized it as Lord Henry Beaumont, the Duke's closest friend. A brief silence followed. Then came her husband's answer. "I know." Her heart tightened. "Then why did you?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Because after her father's death, what future did she have?" Eleanor felt all warmth leave her body. The estate was drowning in debt. Her younger brothers would have lost everything. Someone had to help her. Lord Henry laughed softly. "You're making it sound like a charity project." The Duke's voice remained calm, thoughtful, reasonable, which somehow made it hurt more. Perhaps it was. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the tray. "It wasn't love," the Duke continued, "but it was the right thing to do." The words struck harder than any insult ever could, because there was no cruelty in them, no anger, no hatred, just honesty, painfully honest honesty. For a moment she simply stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to think. Then she quietly turned around and walked away before anyone noticed she had been listening. Years later, Eleanor would remember every detail of that moment. The scent of old books drifting from the library, the weight of the silver tray, the sound of rain against distant windows. Most of all, she would remember realizing that the man she had married did not see her as a woman he loved. He saw her as a problem he had solved. Before we continue, if you enjoy emotional stories about love, heartbreak, regret, and second chances, subscribe to Candlelit Vows for more unforgettable stories like this. And tell me in the comments, do you think a marriage can survive if it begins without love? The strange thing was that Eleanor didn't blame him, not entirely, because everything he had said was true. 2 years earlier, her life had looked completely different. Her father, Lord William Harrington, had been respected throughout the county. Their estate wasn't the largest. Their family wasn't the wealthiest. But they were comfortable, stable, secure. Then Lord Harrington died unexpectedly during a severe winter illness. Everything changed overnight. Debts emerged that nobody knew existed. Investments failed, creditors appeared, family friends stopped visiting. People who once praised the Harrington name suddenly became difficult to find. At 22 years old, Eleanor found herself responsible for a crumbling estate, 2 younger brothers, and a mountain of financial obligations she barely understood. She sold jewelry, sold horses, sold paintings. Every month brought another problem, another bill, another impossible decision. For nearly a year she fought to save her family. Then the Duke arrived. At the time, Duke Adrian Ashford was considered one of the most eligible men in England. Wealthy, respected, intelligent, powerful. Women dreamed of marrying him. Mothers competed for his attention. Eleanor never imagined becoming part of that world. Their first meeting had happened during a charity fundraiser. She still remembered feeling embarrassed by her worn gloves and outdated gown. Compared to the elegant women surrounding him, she looked painfully ordinary. Yet the Duke had been kind. He spoke respectfully, asked thoughtful questions, listened when she answered. A few weeks later, he visited the Harrington estate. Then again. Then again. Eventually, he made an offer nobody expected. Marriage. Society celebrated. Newspapers praised his generosity. Friends called it romantic. Eleanor believed she had been given a miracle. Looking back now, she realized everyone had been correct except about one thing. It wasn't romance. It was rescue. The wedding itself had been beautiful. White roses, golden candlelight, smiling guests, happy tears. Eleanor remembered standing beside Adrian in the church, believing she was the luckiest woman in England. Every time he looked at her, hope bloomed inside her chest. Perhaps affection would grow. Perhaps love would follow. Perhaps one day he would look at her the way husbands were supposed to look at their wives. Then came the library conversation. Then came the truth. That night, Eleanor cried quietly into her pillow after Adrian fell asleep. Not because she hated him, because she loved him already, and because loving someone who pitied you felt unbearably lonely. The next morning, she made a decision that would shape the next several years of her life. If Adrian didn't love her now, she would give him reasons to love her later. It seemed logical, reasonable, hopeful. She would become the perfect wife, the perfect Duchess, the perfect partner. Surely love would follow. People always said love required effort. Eleanor intended to give everything she had. The months that followed became a quiet mission. She learned every detail of the Ashford estate. She memorized names of servants, studied accounts, organized charitable programs, hosted elegant gatherings, solved problems before they reached Adrian's desk. Whenever guests praised the estate, Adrian nodded approvingly. "You've done excellent work." Eleanor treasured those words. Whenever a dinner succeeded perfectly, he thanked her. She treasured that too. Every compliment felt like proof she was moving closer to something, closer to earning his love. The difficult part was that Adrian never treated her badly. He was courteous, respectful, generous. He never raised his voice, never humiliated her, never ignored her completely. Yet there was always a distance between them. An invisible wall neither seemed able to cross. At night he often worked late in his study. During meals he discussed estate matters. During social events he remained polite but reserved. Sometimes Eleanor would catch herself watching him across crowded rooms, wondering what it would feel like if he truly loved her, wondering whether he would smile differently, speak differently, look at her differently. Then she would push the thoughts away and try harder. One evening nearly a year after their wedding, Eleanor organized a charity fundraiser that raised more money than any previous event in county history. Guests applauded her efforts. Newspapers praised her leadership. Even neighboring estates sent congratulations. That night, Adrian found her arranging flowers in the drawing room. "You should be proud of yourself," he said. Eleanor looked up hopefully. "Really?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Of course. You've become an exceptional Duchess." Her heart fluttered. For one brief second, she thought he might say something more, something personal, something meaningful. Instead, he added, "I knew marrying you was the right decision." The smile slowly faded from her face. Not enough for him to notice, just enough for her. Because even after everything, he still sounded like a man discussing a successful investment. Not a wife, not a marriage, a decision. Later that night, Eleanor stood alone beside her bedroom window staring into darkness. For the first time, a frightening question entered her mind. What if becoming perfect wasn't enough? What if love wasn't something that could be earned? What if the man she adored had never intended to love her at all? Down the hallway, Adrian worked quietly inside his study. Neither of them realized it yet, but the first cracks had already begun to form. The first crack in Eleanor's love did not happen all at once. There was no dramatic argument, no betrayal, no scandal. If anyone had looked at the Duke and Duchess of Ashford from the outside, they would have seen a successful marriage, a respected Duke, an admired Duchess, a beautiful estate, elegant parties, charitable work, stability, the kind of life people envied. What nobody saw was Eleanor's quiet exhaustion, because every day felt like an audition. Every kindness, every achievement, every sacrifice. Somewhere deep inside, she still hoped Adrian would eventually look at her and think, I love her, not because she saved a fundraiser, not because she managed an estate, not because she fulfilled her duties perfectly, simply because she was Eleanor. 3 years passed, then 5, then 7. Eleanor became exactly the woman society expected a duchess to be. Guests adored her. Servants respected her. The county trusted her. If someone needed help, they sought Eleanor. If a family struggled through winter, Eleanor organized assistance. If a school needed funding, Eleanor found resources. Her reputation grew steadily. Ironically, the more admired she became by everyone else, the more invisible she felt inside her own marriage. Adrian appreciated her. She never doubted that. He trusted her judgment, valued her competence, respected her intelligence. Yet appreciation was not love. Respect was not love. Gratitude was not love. Sometimes late at night, she would lie awake beside him and wonder whether he even realized the difference. One autumn afternoon, Adrian departed for a 6-week journey to inspect several Ashford properties. As always, Eleanor stood on the front steps to see him off. Travel safely, she said. Adrian smiled. I always do. Then he climbed into his carriage and disappeared down the long estate road. The moment he left, Eleanor felt the familiar ache settle inside her chest. She missed him before he was even gone. So she did what she always did. She wrote to him. The first letter was 4 pages long. She described small events around the estate. A litter of puppies born near the stables. A charity project progressing well. A funny disagreement between 2 gardeners. Nothing particularly important. She simply wanted to share her life with him. Adrian's response arrived a week later. It was brief, polite, informative. He thanked her for the update and assured her the journey was progressing smoothly. Eleanor smiled when she read it anyway. Then she wrote again. For years, this became their pattern. Eleanor wrote long letters filled with details, observations, and pieces of herself. Adrian responded with shorter letters focused mostly on business and travel. She convinced herself it was enough. Then one winter evening, something happened that she could not stop thinking about. A neighboring duchess attended dinner and casually asked a question. How did the Duke propose? Eleanor froze for a moment. The woman laughed. Surely there is a romantic story. Around the table, everyone looked toward her expectantly. Eleanor smiled politely, then realized she had no story to tell. No moonlit confession. No declaration of love. No moment when Adrian chose her above everyone else. Because that wasn't what happened. He had married her because she needed saving. Suddenly she felt foolish. Foolish for spending years trying to transform gratitude into affection. Foolish for believing effort could create feelings that never existed. That night, she sat alone in the library long after everyone else slept. And for the first time, she allowed herself to ask a question she had spent years avoiding. What if Adrian never loved her because he never intended to? The answer frightened her, not because it was painful, because it made sense. After that evening, something slowly began to change. Eleanor continued performing her duties. She still managed the estate flawlessly, still supported charities, still hosted guests, still fulfilled every responsibility expected of her. But inside, hope began quietly dying, not all at once, one small piece at a time. The next time Adrian traveled, she still wrote letters, but they were shorter. Instead of 4 pages, she wrote 2. Instead of sharing every detail, she shared only the important ones. Adrian never mentioned the difference. Months later, she shortened them again. He never noticed that either. Eleanor found herself studying him differently now, not as a woman hoping to be loved, as a woman searching for evidence. Evidence that she mattered beyond her usefulness. Sometimes she found it, most times she didn't. One spring afternoon, while hosting guests in the garden, Eleanor overheard two noble women discussing her marriage. They didn't realize she was nearby. The Duke was very noble to marry her. Eleanor stopped walking. The second woman nodded sympathetically. After her father's debts, she really had no prospects. Still, the first replied, it worked out well. She's become quite useful. Useful. The word followed her all day. Useful. Not beloved. Not cherished. Useful. That evening, Adrian returned from London after several weeks away. As always, Eleanor waited on the front steps to greet him. She smiled, welcomed him home, asked about his journey. Yet something felt different. For the first time in years, she noticed how automatic everything had become. She knew exactly what he would say, exactly how he would smile, exactly how the evening would unfold. Predictable, comfortable, empty. Days later, while organizing correspondence in her private sitting room, Eleanor discovered a box containing old letters she had written during the early years of their marriage. Curious, she opened one, then another, then another. She spent hours reading words written by a younger version of herself. Hopeful words, loving words, desperate words. Every page carried the same silent plea. Please love me. By the time she reached the final letter, tears blurred her vision. Not because Adrian had hurt her, because she suddenly saw how much of herself she had spent. How many years she had invested chasing something that never arrived. That night, Eleanor sat at her desk and began writing another letter to Adrian, who was once again traveling. The words came slowly, much more slowly than before. She stared at the page for a long time, then she folded it, sealed it, sent it. It was the shortest letter she had ever written to him. Hundreds of miles away, Adrian received it 3 days later. He opened it expecting several pages. Instead, he found barely half a page. His brow furrowed slightly. Strange. For reasons he could not explain, the letter unsettled him. Yet after a moment, he simply placed it aside and continued working. Neither of them realized it then. But Eleanor had just written the final letter of her marriage. The final letter written by a woman still hoping to be loved. The first thing Adrian noticed was the silence. Not the silence of an empty house. Ashford Manor was never empty. Servants moved through halls. Horses shifted in stables. Clocks ticked. Fires cracked. Life continued. But something had changed. Eleanor no longer waited on the front steps when his carriage returned. She no longer sent long letters when he traveled. She no longer asked whether he had eaten after late meetings. She no longer looked at him as if his smallest kindness could change her entire day. At first, Adrian told himself she was tired, then busy, then simply maturing into her role. But one evening, during dinner, he finally understood the truth. Eleanor was still there, still graceful, still kind, still perfect. But her heart had quietly left him. "Did I offend you?" he asked suddenly. Eleanor looked up from her soup. "No. You seem distant." She smiled softly. "Do I?" The answer unsettled him more than anger would have. Anger meant feeling. This was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Eleanor." She placed her spoon down. "Yes?" For once, Adrian had no speech prepared. "I miss your letters." Something flickered in her eyes. Not hope, not love, memory. "I used to write too much." "No," he said quickly. "You didn't." She studied him for a moment. "You rarely answered them." The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Adrian looked away. "I didn't know they mattered so much." Eleanor nodded. "I know." That was when panic entered him, not loudly, not dramatically, but cold and sharp. because he suddenly realized she was not punishing him. She had simply stopped expecting anything from him. Days later, Adrian found the old box of letters in her sitting room. He should not have opened it. He knew that. But when he saw his name written across dozens of envelopes in Eleanor's familiar hand, something stronger than manners moved him. He read one, then another, then another. By midnight, the Duke of Ashford sat alone, surrounded by years of love he had never bothered to understand. Every letter was filled with her humor, her worries, her hopes, her loneliness. He found himself in every page, not as the man he had been, but as the man she had tried so desperately to reach. Then he found the final letter, half a page, polite, empty. That was the moment Adrian understood. Eleanor had not stopped writing because she had nothing left to say. She had stopped because she had finally accepted he was not listening. The next morning he found her in the rose garden cutting white flowers for the chapel. "You heard me that night," he said. Eleanor's hand froze. What night? But her voice gave her away. Adrian stepped closer. "Our wedding night, in the library." For a long time she said nothing. Then quietly she answered, "Yes." Shame moved through him so violently he nearly stepped back. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor looked at him then. There were no tears in her eyes. Somehow that hurt more. "What would I have said? That I was wounded by the truth." "Eleanor, you weren't lying, Adrian. That was the hardest part." He could barely breathe. "I was wrong." Her smile was sad. "No. You were incomplete. You married me out of pity. Then I spent years trying to become someone you could. Love. I do love you." The words came fast. Too fast. Years too late. Eleanor closed her eyes. When she opened them, he saw the answer before she spoke. "I loved you for a very long time." Adrian whispered, "Loved?" She looked down at the roses in her hands. "Yes." The single word broke something in him. He wanted anger, accusation, anything he could fight. But Eleanor offered only honesty. "I don't know when it ended," she said. "Perhaps it was the letters. Perhaps it was the dinners. Perhaps it was every time you thanked me like a useful stranger." Her voice trembled only once. "One day I simply stopped hoping." Adrian reached for her hand, then stopped himself. He had no right to demand comfort from the woman he had quietly starved of it. "Can I earn it back?" he asked. Eleanor looked at him with heartbreaking gentleness. "I don't know." That answer became his punishment, not rejection, uncertainty. For months Adrian changed, not loudly, not for society, for her. He came home early, read every old letter, answered them one by one even though they were years late. He learned what flowers she loved, what books made her laugh, which charities mattered most to her. He stopped thanking her like a steward and began seeing her like a wife. Eleanor noticed. Of course she did, but healing does not obey apology. Some days she softened. Some days she remained distant. Adrian accepted both. Then on the anniversary of their wedding, he invited her to the library, the same room where everything had begun to die. Eleanor hesitated at the door. Inside, candles burned softly. On the table lay every letter she had ever written him, tied carefully with blue ribbon. Beside them was a new letter, his. Adrian stood quietly. "I cannot undo what I said here." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "No, but I can tell the truth now." He handed her the letter. "I married you out of pity, but I stayed blind out of pride, and I fell in love too slowly because I was foolish enough to mistake your devotion for duty." Eleanor's hand trembled around the page. Adrian's voice broke. "You were never a charity, Eleanor. You were the gift, and I was the man too arrogant to recognize it." Tears slipped down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she did not hide them. Adrian stepped back, giving her space. I am not asking you to forget. I am not even asking you to forgive me tonight. I am asking for the chance to love you properly, even if it takes the rest of my life. Eleanor looked at the letters, the years, the pain, the love that had once died quietly between them. Then she looked at the man standing before her, finally humble enough to understand the damage he had caused. I don't know if love can return exactly as it was, she whispered. Adrian nodded. Then let it return differently. A small silence followed. Then Eleanor reached for his hand, not fully, not easily, but enough. And for Adrian, it felt like mercy. Months later, people would say the Duke and Duchess of Ashford seemed happier than ever. They would praise their renewed marriage, their devotion, their partnership. But Eleanor knew the truth was more complicated. Love did not return like a grand orchestra. It returned quietly, in answered letters, in shared breakfasts, in apologies that came without excuses, in a husband who finally listened. And perhaps that was enough. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, never spend your whole life trying to earn love from someone who has not learned how to receive it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us again for more unforgettable stories here on Candlelit Vows.